something I wanted to get your take on. There's a lot of young men, especially today, that are sort of struggling to find meaning in life, struggling to find a movement and a way to improve their lives and improve their communities. What advice would you give specifically to them as to what they can do, how they can move forward and start, like you said, building from the ground up, improving their communities, improving their lives?
Well, of course, the first thing, and mind you, what I'm going to say, don't think this is a step-by-step thing. In other words, you've got to wait until you've accomplished this before you can go on to that.
Right. Yeah.
Life isn't like that. You're very often doing 17 different steps of quote unquote self-improvement all at the same time.
Yeah.
But you always, of course, start with yourself. And what is my late father used to say, you can't make anyone else, you can't control anyone else. All you can do is be the kind of gentleman you think everyone else ought to be.
Mm.
So that's where it starts. So you look at yourself. Your faith comes first, of course, because that's reality.
Yeah.
Everything else partakes of a certain amount of fantasy. That is on the part of human beings. We like to gild everything. But the revelation the church has given us, that is the one source of truth in this life that you can be absolutely sure of.
Yeah.
You take the four creeds and then you go on from there. That is reality. That's truth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be doing an article today or tomorrow for somebody or other. I'm calling it the cost of reenchantment.
Mm.
And the cost of reenchantment is accepting this terrible truth. And why is it a terrible truth? Well, it's a terrible truth because it says we're all fallen. We all need redemption. And that spits in the face of everything we're told.
Yeah.
You're a perfect shining star, just the way that you are.
Mm.
No, you're not. But on the other hand, you're not the worst either.
Mm.
And one thing you've got to bear in mind in life is you'll always have two poles to go between. And I don't mean right or left. I mean, every conceivable element of life has two separate poles you need to avoid, and they're different from each other. But at any rate, so you don't want to be presumptuous. You don't want to despair. In this particular area, those are the two poles you have to avoid.
Yeah.
Despair and presumption. You're constantly looking out to improve your prayer life, your sacramental life, and so on. Then you need to improve, of course, yourself physically if you're very weak. If you're not, don't worry about it. If you're able to rip telephone books apart, then okay, that's great. If not, well, but you do need to expand your knowledge. None of us know our faith. None of us know history. None of us know literature nearly as much as we could and should.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always, always, always more to learn. The minute you stop learning, you're dead. And ideally, that's the only time you should stop learning, is when you die. As soon as they put the sheet over your head, then feel free to stop learning new stuff. Until then, keep pushing. Then what you need to do, well, you search out like-minded individuals. You go to organizations that feel your interest. Mm-hmm. The church, of course, But from there on, you've got to look at your own particular interests and talents. And this is very, very important because you wouldn't have them if God hadn't put them there.
Mm-hmm.
If you happen to be a great pianist or you have an extraordinary interest in reenactment or in car mechanics or in tobacco or tea or whatever it is, go into it, explore it, participate fully in the life of whatever that is. Always bearing in mind that you have now a God-given mission to evangelize amongst the people that you're working with. And that is actually true at work. but it's we start with places that you would actually enjoy being at.
Yeah.
And then you can go out a little bit further and look at where you happen to live, where you are. The local historical society, the local conservation people, they'll be filled with literature circles. They'll be filled with strange, peculiar people, I promise you.
Definitely.
But if the goal, if A, they don't throw you out, and B, the goal is worthwhile. I mean, it's a thing, it's we've got to save the old Cartwright place. Why? Because it's a part of the history of this town of ours. It's the prettiest thing in 3 counties. We certainly couldn't build anything like it now. So let's keep the old Cartwright place, or the Mogaluk waterfall, or whatever it is, because you'll be working with people. You'll learn organizational skills, and this is very, very important for your future. If you have any kind of leadership at all, any leadership abilities, you've got to develop it. And the way you develop it is in organizations. And what is the essence of leadership? It's getting people to do what you want them to do for their reasons. That way you're not dragooning them into line. They'll be far happier to follow your lead if they're doing it for their purpose. And country-wise, as long as it isn't immoral, obviously.
Yep.
You make sure they get what it is they came in for. Well, why am I working on protecting the old Cartwright house? Well, actually, I've got a tremendous interest in teak wood. There's teak wood all through. Great. You could gawk at that teak wood in your life. You can catalog it. You can take pictures. You can touch it. As long as you're here on Friday to be a docent, have at it, pal. Well, this way you're all getting what you want. You've got the free docent you need, and they get to exercise their interest in teak wood.
Right.
It takes all kinds, ladies and gentlemen. Never forget that. It takes all kinds.
Very true.
As long, I mean, I don't have a great interest in teak wood. I got to be honest with you. I really don't.
I don't either. Yeah.
But you know what? I am excited, though, in a way, by someone who can come up to you. Not usually on the spectrum, but not always. They come up to you and say, the thing about teak, look here. You can say, now this teak is obviously Indian teak, and I'd say this is from Madras. Well, it's not my interest, but actually it's part of the totality.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, we need people who have that kind of interest, not for our personal sakes, but for the greater good, for the common good.
Yeah.
And this year is another thing I would recommend highly, because it comes easy, unfortunately, in a hypercritical day. Very often today, when you hear someone being praised for something, or someone gets an award, etc., the first instinct is to criticize.
Yeah.
And to fault find. Well, other than perhaps living in mother's basement, where am I getting off doing that? And how am I threatened by them doing well at something? Yeah. The truth is, in fact, the opposite. Anybody who achieves anything, so long as it's, decent, is actually doing us all a favor. I don't care tuppence about the World Series. I really don't. But you know what? A lot of people do. And a lot of people are thrilled when somebody or other wins the pennant. And guess what? A lot of work goes into doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Could I play a decent game of baseball? Not on your tin type. So where would I get off? Unless it was coupled with some obvious horror, or evil, or whatever. Where would I get off criticizing people for wasting their time with this?
Yeah.
I mean, what is interesting to me very often, I mean, I have no real interest in the sport, but I'll tell you, the life of Babe Ruth's really interesting.
Yeah.
And yet you can't really understand Babe Ruth if you don't understand a thing or two about baseball.
Yeah.
I just resaw Field of Dreams recently for the first time since it came out. And apart from once again hearing my generation congratulate ourselves on how wonderful we are, you have no idea how wonderful it feels being one of us. But what?
Oh, yeah, no, it's it's.
I'm see. My problem is I'm a junior boomer.
A junior boomer. Yeah.
I was born in 1960, so like the boom ended in '64.
Right.
So my peers and I, our joke is that we're old enough to get all the opprobrium from you people, but too young to have gotten any of the benefits.
It was such an awful spot. Yeah, it's
it's really bad. We were stuck with the '70s. Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Well, you had ABBA though. That's something, It's
oh yeah, that's something. All right, and we had the Son of Sam. Great. Yeah, and the Bicentennial Minute.
Right.
Yeah, we had Schoolhouse Rock. Oh yeah, we had it.
Peak of culture. Peak of culture. Yeah.
Peak of something. But my joke, to young people here, and I'll share it with you, is, I don't want you guys to go out thinking that my generation ruined everything for you. No, heavens no. I want you all to think of it as though we left you a series of character building challenges.
I'll start seeing it as that. Yeah, I think many people can.
At least that's what I tell myself when I wake up at night in a cold sweat. Sorry, caught in the throat. But no, I mean, honestly, it is. That too has been the shadow of the boomer, quote unquote, has been or the generation of '68, as we say on this side of the water, has been a long one. And we really did mess up a whole lot of stuff. But the thing to bear in mind is that all of us are the creations of the history that we inherit.
Yeah.
My generation, the oldest of us, were in our 20s when the leadership of the church went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the youngest among the clergy, the youngest members of the last generation, the oldest members of mine, who are now, who were then the hatchet men, not the initiators, not the originators of the bad ideas, but they're hatchet men. And like hatchet men everywhere, they're just not that bright. Yeah. And now they're in charge, and they want to see their work done before they're carted off to the cemetery. So they explode in senile rage. And I understand. I accept that. There's a comedian a couple of years older than myself, whose name escapes me, but he has a great line, which is, I wish the boomers would just die. Because the problem is that when they do, they're taking me with them. And I understand that. But when you look at everybody from the Holy Father on down, and you hear this womanish hysteria, in the words like the latest, the Holy Father has just had all of Pope Benedict XVI's coats of arms removed.
I just saw that. Yeah, goodness gracious. Yeah. Yeah, it can seem like that. It seems like that. Yeah,
it does. It's an hysterical old lady having a fit.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't do this in real life, of course, but you feel like grabbing some of these people and sitting them down forcibly and saying, "There, Grandma. It's all right. You'll be better."
Yeah. And you and I, we were joking, of course, about some of these things of the current generation has been ruined. But I think the truth is a lot of young men would do well to take your advice. And I think if young men did do that, I think we can actually start seeing some improvement. We have a lot of problems with the modern age that we're in, but it's not necessarily unique. Every single generation has faced problems. I mean, of course, it wasn't that long ago where we had a generation having to go through World War II, the First World War, and I mean, as you mentioned, the Vietnam War as well. So people can take concrete steps to improve their situation. I think you've given them a great deal of hope. So thank you for that.
I just point out two things. One is that today is January 3rd, which was J.R.R. Tolkien's birthday.
Yeah.
Now, he went through World War One, and as he put it very poignantly, by the end of the war, all but one of his closest friends were dead.
That's rough. Yeah.
It's very rough. But from the horror and the joy of his life, and from his faith, he'd be the first one to tell you this, he made Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Which has been a staff of life to God knows how many people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that, we're obviously not all Tolkien's by any stretch. But the fact is that if you're handed a harsh thing, you try to make the best of it. And the two things you have to avoid, and this is absolutely top. Remember, at the end of the day, we're talking about our individual salvation.
Mm-hmm.
The devil, who goeth about as a lion, seeking whom he may devour, wants us to do two things. He wants us to hate, and he wants us to despair, because these are the only emotions he has left. And so, above anything else, when you find yourself falling into the hatred or despair, stop.
Yeah.
Just stop it. If you're, if you're feeling hate towards someone, say a prayer for them.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's a little old lady cleric who's, wrecking everything around her, pray for her, because you don't want her to die.
Right.
With this, I came to an interesting realization some few years ago, which is that of all the people I've actually met, and some of whom I have utterly despised, I've had utter contempt for, there's not one of them I'd want to see fry forever.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe smacked around pretty good, but not simply frying forever. And thinking about the four last things, and particularly the enormity of hell, yeah, it's good for us, but it's also good for avoiding hatred of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because now, and mind you, there will be exceptions. If somebody molested your kid brother, I'm afraid you probably will want him to go to hell. You should try not to.
Yeah.
But there are.
Yeah.
I know he murdered my wife, but on the other hand, he was good to his dog. Well,
yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to do that.
Yeah, there's exceptions.
I mean, God may not make those exceptions, but I think he'll understand if we have trouble. But the other is the temptation to despair. And so what do? You look at everything that's good. That's good in your life. That's good around you. It's one of the reasons why, the old Cartwright house or so-and-so winning the World Series, whatever gives you good, innocent pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, we are such stuff. We should be able to think immediately of the Blessed Trinity and the Holy Eucharist. Unfortunately, we're not really like that.
Right.
So the trick is to first pull away from the immediate. So it's horrible forever, and then you say, well, I really like green sleeves. It's really pretty. And then you think, yeah, and of course it's also used for what child is this? And then you start thinking of the babe of Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Try to train yourself when you begin to despair and see, and just it all seems dark. To pull back, zero in on something you like, and then relate that something you like to the highest good. Because all these goods come from God, the giver of all gifts.
Yeah.
There isn't
That's
a
very
single,
true.
it is. There isn't a single good thing in your life that God didn't give you. Usually through, I mean, even himself, he mediates through bread and wine. So
Right.
he's real big on this whole mediating thing. And that's probably just as well, because I don't, I can wait until the final judgment to see him face to face. I think if I had an apparition right here, right now, I don't think I'd handle it very well.
Yeah, that mediating thing is kind of his thing. So absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's such good advice, Charles. And thanks so much for coming on again. And again, if you want to see more of Charles's work, you can go over to Tumblr House. You can see him on the Off the Menu podcast or purchase some of his books. And if you want to support Catholic Family News, our January issue has just come out, and you can become a subscriber there on CatholicFamilyNews.com. So thanks so much for joining us, Charles.
Glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. God bless.
God bless you. Happy New Year.
You as well.